Hi, team. All right, so today we are going to talk about labs. Get excited. So, I like to do a lot of laboratory activities in this course. A lot. Some years I get as many as 15 in. I always get at least 10 in. They're fun, they're hands-on, they're a great way to learn chemistry. But we can only get a bunch of labs in if you guys are ready, set, prepared, and good to go with them, so that when it's time to do a lab, you show up, you come in the room, and you start doing it, and we're like, bam, 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 go, go, go. And that can only happen if you're ready, all right? But that's the only way this works, because otherwise, every lab ends up taking 2 full periods, and that's just not sustainable. It has to be the case that the labs that I've designed to last 1 period, we come in, we're prepped, we're ready, we do them safely, and they take 1 period. Does that make sense? Yes, Mr. Orlando, it makes sense. Good. So, here's what we are going to do. Tomorrow we're going to do our first lab, and historically, I've always given people a physical lab notebook and made them work on it. But here I am, and I'm trying something different. Makes me a little nervous because I like, things to be the same. I don't like change any more than I like that my internet connection seems to be spazzing out right now. Give me a sec. Not a fan. Hopefully we're back. All right, let's take a look. So, your labs are going to be done in a digital lab notebook. Right? In a digital lab notebook. And here we are looking at our digital lab notebook. We are going to always prep them ourselves. So here's what's going to happen. I am going to share with you a copy of the lab. All right, that's already in your lab notebook. If you look here, you'll see Laboratory 1.1, Properties of Ionic and Covalent Compounds, and then here are all the instructions for that lab. All right? So there are the lab instructions right there. But when you come into the lab, you can't just use those instructions, all right? That isn't how working in the lab works. You have to know what's up, and the only way for you to know what's up is for you to prepare the lab yourself. So what we're gonna have you do is you are going to read this lab instructions, and you are going to then write your own prep and your own instruction manual so you know what you're doing, so you know what's up. Does that make sense? I hope so. So, to be clear, you're going to read this, but then you're going to make your own prep. This is shared with you. In fact, I'm going to show you. I'm assigning it to you right now, a blank lab book. So, go into Teams, go into Chemistry, and we're going to go to Assignments. I'm going to make a new assignment. I'm going to create an assignment. And it's going to be called Lab 1.1 Properties of Ionic and Covalent Compounds. And we're going to attach a OneNote to this. So we're going to say Content Library. What's that one called? Lab 1.1. Not Content Library. Teacher only. Laboratory Notebook. lab 1.1, lab 1.1. We're going to attach that. It'll take its sweet time, and we're going to put it in your lab notebook. All right, so we do that. This is going to be due on Friday, and we assign it. Okay, so there we go. So now that's going to appear for and exist for you. So there it is. And it'll take a minute to appear, but when you get there, it's going to, like if I pretend to be Elizabeth Brady, when she loads this, it is blank here, right? There's nothing here. And the reason there's nothing there is because you have to prep it yourself. So, Elizabeth is going to put her own prep in here. So she's going to say procedure, and then blah, blah, blah. This is how we do this lab. And then safety precautions. This is where we would put key safety stuff. And then results and observations. And this is where we prepare our tables and stuff for our data. Maybe I'll make a table. Table 1. Here's where some data would go. And then I'd go insert table. And we'd be like, hey, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4. And then, of course, I'm going to make this look a little bit nice. Maybe I'll, up this font size a little bit. Right, we're going to make it look decent. But here's the main thing I want you to know. This isn't a formal lab report. All right, you're not writing a formal lab report, but rather what you're doing is you're writing this for your own benefit. Let me say that again. This isn't a formal lab report. You're writing this stuff out for your benefit. You are going to read the lab report that I gave there for you, Laboratory 1.1. You're going to read all this, and then you're going to write out a version of it that you understand. Now, that's going to look different for different of you. Some people have to write a lot. Some people get it and can write a little. But see all this introduction? That introduction is all very good and interesting. It's worth reading. But does it have anything to do with the lab we're doing? Not the day of. I mean, it's related to it, but you don't need that for the lab. So I wouldn't copy all this introduction. You could, but I think that'd be a big waste of time. All right? The point of your lab notebook is that it is the instructions that you need to follow so that when you come into the lab, you can look at your lab notebook, know exactly what to do, and then down below in your lab notebook, you have a place to put all your data. So I would skip this introduction. I wouldn't even necessarily write the purpose, but I would definitely write the materials, because the materials are going to tell me what I need to get when we start the lab. So I'd read that and I'd go, okay, you know what, that's a good idea. So I'm going to say, hey, materials, and then say, at the beginning of the lab, get, and then I'd go, scopula, 2 beakers, 10 test tubes, 2 cartridges, 1 pear tree, whatever, right? I would list all of that right here. Then I would go back in here and look and say, okay, what am I doing? Procedure, part 1, part 2, part 3. And if we look at this procedure we're doing tomorrow is actually pretty simple. In part 1, we're going to go into the fume hood, We're going to put our goggles on. We're going to get an aluminum foil tray. We're going to make wedges in it. We're going to label the wedges. We're going to put a little bit of each of the samples we're studying on this. Then we're going to put it on a hot plate turned on high, and we're going to see what order they melt in. So we know which of our compounds has a high melting point and a low melting point. Then we're going to turn the hot plate off. That's what we're doing with this little section. So now that we know that, I'm going to write this in my own words. I'm going to say, okay, procedure, station 1, melting point. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to open this in the desktop app just so that you can, read it, so I can zoom in. So I'd say, get an aluminum foil tray and divide it into wedges. Label the wedges. Put a small amount of each of our chemicals on the tray. One sample per wedge. And probably I'd put dashes in front of these so I can see it's like point form, right? And then I would say, put the tray on the hot plate and set the plate to high. And then, I would observe the order in which they melt and write it down in the table in my results section. So now I've got a good procedure for station 1. But even better, I know that in my results I'm going to need that. So now I can actually say station 1, melting points. And then I can get a table ready. And really for this one I just need chemical, time to melting. And that's it. And I could be like sucrose, salt, camphor. And I can just write these down. Oh, sucrose took 12 seconds to melt. Oh, salt only took 3 seconds. I can just have my data there. But I'm ready for when we're actually in the lab. I've got a table ready and waiting. That's the point of this, is that if you do your job, you have a place for all of your data before you need it. And then we just keep going through the lab and write the rest of it. So I hope that makes some kind of sense. I'm going to stop messing up Elizabeth Brady's thing here. So your task before lab tomorrow is to go through and read the lab and then to write your own version of the procedure in your own words in that blank copy I've attached for you, and to also have tables ready to put your data in. Tomorrow's lab is simple. You're going to test 3 things. You're going to test to see what order these compounds, you're going to get a bunch of chemicals, 8 of them, 7, something like that. It's in the lab. And first you're going to see what order do they melt in. Do some of them melt quickly? Do some of them take a long time to melt? Do some not really melt at all? That's cool. You're going to write that down. 2, how well do they dissolve in water? You're going to try dissolving them all in some water and see how well they do so. And then 3, if they dissolve in water, how well do they conduct electricity? That's it. That's the lab. How do they melt? How do they dissolve in water? If they dissolve in water, how do they conduct electricity? And from that, we're going to try to see if we can learn about the difference between ionic compounds and covalent compounds. Do ionic compounds melt easily, or are they hard to melt? Do ionic compounds tend to dissolve in water or not? Do ionic compounds, once they're dissolved in water, conduct electricity, or don't they? Then all the same stuff for covalent. Does that make sense? That's the lab. It's easy, but we need to be ready for it. If you have any questions about this, shoot me a message, because in block 2 tomorrow, we are going to do this lab. And I want